I hope everybody filled up on some Thanksgiving food this week because now we've got to digest all the injuries that we're going through. Guys like Devonta Smith and Keon Coleman being true game time calls. And this is precisely the reason I wait till the end of the week every single week to go through every single matchup to find the must-start and sit wide receivers in fantasy. So please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support because I'm the only YouTuber working on a Saturday to get you this type of content. So our first matchup, the Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars here. Nico Collins, obviously a must-start. I don't think there's a particular need to talk about him. The Jags are horrific against wide receivers in fantasy. Nico should have a really big day. And then we've got Brian Thomas Jr., who becomes immediately interesting again with Trevor Lawrence back in the lineup, which he is expected to be back in the lineup this week. It changes the game for not only Brian Thomas Jr., but for someone who will go through here in a minute, because Brian Thomas Jr., that's the only path to upside in fantasy football. His targets have dropped specifically over the past month and a half or so, but if he comes back in the lineup with Trevor Lawrence, he definitely still does have the big play upside. And I would say Tank Dell is clearly below Brian Thomas Jr. in the pecking order of this particular matchup. Tank Dell's ceiling is just not very high. His floor with Nico Collins has actually become kind of stable. It's been around 8 to 12 points depending on if you're a half PPR or a full PPR format. He's just not a big play threat because he's not that good of a player right now. And we've got Parker Washington. That's the name to remember here. I'm not playing him. I'm not going to tell you to play him. But essentially what he's been serving is that Christian Kirk role. So with Trevor Lawrence back in the lineup, I do foresee potential upside in a full PPR format in the several weeks coming, but I'm not going out on a limb today. Now going down to our next matchup, the Indianapolis Colts at the New England Patriots this week. And I don't think there's a must-start receiver in here. I will say Michael Pittman Jr. is the best one. Now, last week, he definitely was the number one target, and he actually did pretty well. Like, that was his first good game with Anthony Richardson. And that's just the reason why he's not a must-start. Like, I'm not relying on that one game of information to say, yes, Michael Pittman Jr., saved by the bell. Like, we can all play him now. I don't feel that way still. I still think he's a very risky play at any spot. I don't like this play with Michael Pittman Jr. because I don't trust Anthony Richardson to consistently get him the ball. I like the matchup. That's why he's the best option today. And Demario Douglas and Alec Pierce, they're both questionable heading into this game. Alec Pierce probably is going to play because he's coming off a full practice on Friday. But with Demario Douglas, if he plays, I prefer him. Douglas has actually been a really consistent target for Drake May. It's been Demario Douglas, and it's been Hunter Henry. So I think Demario Douglas actually has a good amount of upside in the Colts matchup here. And then Alec Pierce, like I said, he's the deep shot to take. He falls under the Quentin Johnston category, who we'll discuss here in a little bit. And, you know, just a bunch of guys that can make big plays depending on the week. And I think Adonai Mitchell will fit that bill if Alec Pierce doesn't play. But that's the only way I'm going to tell you guys I would play Adonai Mitchell is if Alec Pierce does not play. And I'm not playing Downs because obviously he's injured and out for this game. And Kayshon Boutte still got an eye on him, but I'm not playing him this week. The Los Angeles Chargers at the Atlanta Falcons this week. Drake London is a must-start still to me. He's had a rough couple of weeks for sure. Coming out of the bye week versus the Chargers, who are really stiff against running backs, I just think that he'll have a good game. Like, it's not like he's lost importance to the offense. That's an important piece to remember. He has not lost importance to the offense. It's essentially just been him and Kirk not being on the same page the last couple of games. That offense just looked a little weird over the past several weeks. I think that Drake London is still in must-start category. If he has another stinker this week, then we'll be discussing him maybe as more of a high-end flex. But with Darnell Mooney, he's definitely the best flex option because I prefer him over Ladd McConkey because his ceiling is higher in certain weeks. Ladd, his ceiling is never going to be extremely high because he's only working off of like less than 10 targets per game. And that will never change because Ladd is still dealing with an injury and they don't want to overwork him. So with Darnell Mooney, I do think that even though he's been dealing with an injury, I think that he is the best flex option of the bunch. With Ladd McConkey, I do believe that he's a great flex as well. I think that there's a lot that can be said about Ladd McConkey and his floor because his floor lately has been really solid. But the ceiling, again, is not super high. Now with the Falcons here, I do think that the matchup is obviously fantastic, but it was last week and he didn't do very much. So Ladd McConkey got a low floor, he's got a low ceiling, and a pretty safe floor. And I will say this, Obviously, nobody wants to play Quentin Johnston after the embarrassment on Monday Night Football. I do think that Quentin Johnston is still playable. Falcons are a good matchup, and it's a 12 o'clock game slot, which means he's not under the bright lights of prime time. I do think that had an effect on him. I personally do. So I will say that Quentin Johnston is not obviously in the same tier as Ladd or Darnell Mooney, but I do believe that he is playable this week. And Ray, I just say not to play him unless you're in a deeper format. And Josh Palmer, I will never play him. I consistently said this, I think that I could pick up a bunch of people off the street, and they'll have better ball skills than Joshua Palmer does. He is atrocious, and I've been calling him out all year. The Seattle Seahawks at the New York Jets. Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf, Garrett Wilson, they're all must starts. Now, for me personally, I do have Garrett Wilson on the edge. He's on the fringe of must start and high-end flex, which I just kind of leaned to go with must start because the Seahawks are a beatable matchup. And Garrett Wilson, the last 2 weeks, it's not been good. And this team is really, they're already in disaster mode, but they're even closer because Aaron Rodgers may get benched in the next several weeks. One thing we do know is that Aaron Rodgers is playing this game, so we do know that Garrett Wilson does have the upside that he's had throughout the year. Now, the floor is less stable, and that's why he was borderline on the high-end flex option, but he has still got a really high ceiling, so I'm going to go with him as a must-start this week. And Davante Adams is a high to mid-end flex option. In all reality, his ceiling is not very high because he's not getting the Garrett Wilson downfield targets. What he does for Aaron is he provides a safety blanket, kind of like a Keenan Allen, to where he's running a bunch of shorter routes, but he's always usually going to catch the ball. So Davante Adams, I just don't consider him much more than just a mid-end flex option because he just doesn't have a very high ceiling. And Tyler Lockett, the past several weeks with the Jackson with the Jigba breakout, has become a little invisible. So unless you're in a really deep league, I'm not playing Tyler Lockett. Tennessee Titans at the Washington Commanders this week. Terry McLaurin, still a must start. This guy's crushing it. Let's not even discuss. Calvin Ridley and Nick Westbrook-Ikine. They're both flexible. Calvin Ridley is definitely the better flex option because his target share is consistent. He's got a high ceiling. That's the good thing and I will say this. I'm big on insulting Will Levis. I'm big on just destroying him every time I talk about him. He's been low-key decent the past several weeks. Since he came back from injury, he's been low-key decent. And it's another good matchup. I think Calvin Ridley might have a big game. It's very possible. I would say Calvin's a high-end flex. Whereas with Nick Westbrook-Ikine, what he's been doing is I don't know how he continues to get away with it. I mean, he has had 6 touchdowns in the last 7 games. It's absurd. Because his target share is not high. Max 6 targets for Nick Westbrook-Ikine, and he's getting away with it weekly. So just for that reason, he's catching lightning in a bottle right now. You can continue to ride the lightning, but I would not say that he's anything more than a mid-end flex option, similar to the play that a Quentin Johnston type is. And then Noah Brown, I'm not playing him either. It's just usually a 1 wide receiver show in Washington. And Tyler Boyd, if you're still rostering him, I think you should just cut him. The Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cincinnati Bengals this week. I think Jamar Chase obviously is a must start, and I think that T. Higgins is a must start kind of every week. I get it, he's a wide receiver too in the offense, but at the same time, if you just look at what T has done this year, it's been outstanding. He's been averaging 15 fantasy points per game. Half PPR. He's done absolutely fantastic work. And I get it, the matchup isn't fantastic. The problem with the Bengals is that they're not a balanced offense. Chase Brown, good running back for fantasy, but mostly because he catches passes. He's not exactly a Derrick Henry on the ground who's able to just take that load off them. They miss Joe Mixon. But that offense is so imbalanced towards the pass, it makes both those wide receivers a must-start weekly to me. George Pickens, high-end flex, for sure. The Bengals are a beatable matchup. I think the Steelers are going to have to throw to keep up because the Bengals will put up points. I expect the Bengals to win this game, and I do expect the Steelers will have to throw a lot to keep up. That keeps George Pickens involved on every series. He should be the number 1 target. And I'll say this, Calvin Austin, I think he falls under that Quentin Johnston category this week. I think he's playable. The guy has been hitting on big plays the past month. Again, it's similar to Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, to where his target share is not very big, but he's been hitting. Russell Wilson has been finding him. There's chemistry that's being built with those two guys in particular. So I do think Calvin Austin does have a role and definitely can be played as more of a dart throw for a big play. Andre Yeshivas has become irrelevant, and Van Jefferson just isn't very good. Kind of falls under Joshua Palmer category for me, where I'm never advising people to play him. The Arizona Cardinals at the Minnesota Vikings this week. Justin Jefferson's still a must start. I get it, last several weeks have not been fun, but this guy realistically, like, I will never put him in flexible category for one reason alone. He's an elite player. This guy can easily, at any moment, go off for like a 60 to 70 yard touchdown and get 10 catches for 100 plus. And then you'll be looking on the bench like, why did I bench this guy? You don't bench him. You never bench Justin Jefferson. I get it. Rough patch here. Not because of him. I think Sam Darnold is having issues right now. But I'm not telling you to put Justin Jefferson on your bench. And then Marvin Harrison Jr., I would say, is the clear best option between him and Jordan Addison. Marvin is going to be in a matchup that I like. The Minnesota Vikings, the one weakness they've had is defending the pass. Their wide receivers can go wild on the Minnesota Vikings here. So with the Arizona Cardinals, I do think with Marvin, they will have to potentially hit a big play in order for them to gain a lead versus the Minnesota Vikings, who have been looking good offensively and defensively late. So I do think that they're going to have to hit a big play, target Marvin over the downfield middle, and he'll be able to hit on a game like this in an easier matchup. And then we've got Jordan Addison, who I know I heard it, like during the wide receiver rankings video this week, I heard a lot of people saying, why is Addison not ranked this week? Listen, if you go back to his last several games, like, he's not been particularly involved consistently. He is still in the category of Quentin Johnston a little bit, but where he's a higher end Quentin Johnston because he does dominate a game. Quentin Johnston can't dominate a game. He'll dominate a play, but he will not dominate a game. Addison dominated the game last week. So that's always possible, but you have to understand, his floor is still really, really low. So he's not a must-start guy for me. He's not even above Marvin for me this week. I think Addison is a really high-end flex option this week because he's got the big play upside and the potential to dominate a game, but I'm not putting him in must-start territory, and he's close to the top 30, but he's not there yet. Michael Wilson and Jalen Naylor, I'll have an eye on them in this game, but I'm not telling you to play them in fantasy unless you're in a deep, deep league. The Los Angeles Rams at the New Orleans Saints this week. Puka, Cooper Kupp, they're conjoined twins. They literally are. Like, they are both must-start guys, and neither can separate. Cooper Kupp has definitely been the better fantasy player as of late, but that's not because Puka has not done bad. Cooper, his situation is he's catching the touchdown passes and the high percentage throws. So he's more efficient on his work. Puka is the downfield threat. Puka can go off for 200 plus. I mean, seriously, like, that's what the direction we're heading in here. And against the Saints, I just think the matchup is so great. You can never sit either of these Rams receivers, so that's why they're just conjoined twins. I'm telling you guys. And then Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Demarcus Robinson, they're in the very same matchup tier. Like, they are both guys that can hit on a touchdown, but they're not dominating a game. I will say, Marquez Valdes-Scantling has dominated a couple games, but I just don't see how it keeps up. It doesn't make sense to me. The guy's been bad everywhere he's been. He's had a 2-game stretch that's awesome, but this guy is going to burn bright and burn out really quick. And with Demarcus Robinson, obviously he's in that same tier as well. Touchdown or bust for Demarcus Robinson on a weekly basis. The one guy I will say to keep your eye on is Cedric Wilson. Because Cedric Wilson, I've always said, I think is going to be the target guy over in New Orleans. Without Chris Olave, without Rashid Shaheed, I think Cedric Wilson will handle the majority of the targets. So I do think that he is playable this week. Now, it's his first game back in probably a month at this point. So I don't know what his involvement will be in particularly this game. But I do think that in the future, he will be the number one target as long as Chris Olave is out. So I think he's playable in this game with potential to become a decent flex option in the future. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Carolina Panthers this week. Mike Evans is a must-start in this game. The matchup is fantastic. I believe his second week back will be much better than his first week back. I've got all the confidence in the world in Mike Evans. Remember, the guy's got massive big play upside, and his floor is pretty stable. Adam Thielen is a legit high-end flex option. Legitimate. Targets are going to be there. It's a great matchup. That's why all three Panthers wide receivers are playable this week. Bryce Young has been looking better. This team is actually building a real culture over here right now. Adam Thielen's the best because he will handle the targets. Xavier Legette still a big play threat. David Moore last week dominated the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think I see that again. But I will say this. I cannot put him as a must bench. This guy is absolutely playable. I would say him and Xavier Legette are probably in the same tier. I clearly prefer Adam Thielen because I believe he's the most consistent of the group, but David Moore is absolutely in the same tier as Xavier Legette. I'm just not predicting that type of game for David Moore again because we don't really see that ever from David Moore. Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, I'm keeping an eye on them. Not playing them, but I will say this. With Evans back in the fold, I'm curious to see what they build as far as the passing arsenal goes over there. Sterling Shepard definitely did not get the work that he had been getting. And Jalen McMillan, I think the less work for him, he could become a potential Quentin Johnston big play threat. So I'm curious to watch how this one plays out, but don't play them this week. The Philadelphia Eagles at the Baltimore Ravens this week. A.J. Brown, obviously play him. Zay Flowers, obviously play him as well. Lower floor, but again, massive ceiling. I think this game has potential to be a 60-point game. Like, honestly, these teams are going to be fighting really hard because the Ravens need to win. And the Eagles, they're trying their best to get the number 1 or number 2 spot. So they're going to be playing really good football. I think that Zay Flowers is going to be a great play this week. Devonta Smith looks like a true questionable. He says he's not sure if he's able to play. This hamstring injury is a problem for sure. Hammies are usually not 1 week misses. They're usually multi-week misses. So Devonta Smith, I'm probably leaning against that he'll be able to play, but that does not mean I'm playing Jahan Dotson. I've got no interest in playing Jahan Dotson. This guy is just not very good. Like, it's sad. It's really sad, but it's just not a good situation for Jahan Dotson. And Rashad Bateman definitely falls under the Quentin Johnston category. Big play threat, always capable of doing it. And I would actually say it's become relatively consistent. Like, as long as he's getting targeted, he catches the ball. Like, he actually does have good hands and good ball skills. So, I actually feel much better about playing Bateman than I do with playing Quentin Johnston or Nick Westbrook-Akine. I think Rashad Bateman in this type of matchup actually has legitimate upside for a massive game. And again, not playing Jahan Dotson, not playing Aguilar in Baltimore, but I've got an eye on him, and Deontay Johnson has really become irrelevant. Like, they're trying. That's the thing, is they're trying to get him involved. It has not worked yet. So I don't know if it ever will. San Francisco 49ers at the Buffalo Bills. This is our Sunday night matchup. Jawan Jennings becomes a must-start the moment Brock Purdy steps on the field. And as of right now, Brock Purdy is expected to play. So this one means a lot. This is a great opportunity to play Jawan Jennings if he does have that ability. So I think Jawan Jennings, with Brock Purdy back in the lineup, is a must-start player because he is clearly the best option, not Deebo Samuel. And Deebo is just a high-end, I wouldn't even say high-end flex. I think he's a mid-end flex at this point. His big play upside has not been there. I still believe it's in there somewhere. I just don't know where it is. Deebo Samuel, low floor, low ceiling right now. In this matchup versus the Bills, they're going to have to do everything they can to win because they're on the playoff bubble right here. They have to win moving forward. So I think Deebo's playable, but he's in the same tier as Amari and Shakir for me. I think Amari and Shakir are just as playable because Amari definitely in this type of matchup against the 49ers who are beatable through the air, I think has that upside. His target share is still not satisfactory enough, though. And that's why Khalil Shakir, in a PPR format, I'd play him over Amari Cooper. I would. If it was half PPR, I'd probably play Amari Cooper. Try to hit on the big play, but this is also going to be a snowy game. So keep that in mind. Probably not tons of throwing in this game as much as they would like to throw. I do kind of expect this to be a James Cook type of matchup. Keon Coleman, here's the deal, is a game time decision. That's not good for Sunday Night Football. Unless you have another option in this game or the Monday night game, I'm going to say to bench Keon Coleman. It's unfortunate. I do believe when he comes back, he does have massive big play upside because he was breaking out before he got injured. But I'm not there this week because it's a Sunday night game and he's a true game time call. And Ricky Pearsall, borderline droppable, but I'm not doing it just yet personally, but I'm not playing him this week. And the Cleveland Browns at the Denver Broncos is our last matchup of the week. Courtland Sutton is a must-start at this point. If you didn't get the memo, this guy's been fantastic. Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton, they're on a freaking heater. You do not put him on your bench when he's on this much of a heater. Jerry Jeudy is the best option in Cleveland. I will say this. I expect him to be shadowed for 80% of the game by Pat Surtain. That's not a good equation. Not a good equation at all. I worry about that for sure. It is a revenge game. I do like that. But Pat Surtain knows how to beat Jerry Jeudy. He does. So I don't love this. I think Elijah Moore has lots of playability because Cedric Tillman is questionable in this game, but he did not practice all week. He's not going to play. So I don't think that Elijah Moore is a bad play at all this week. I think that there's potential he actually has a really solid game. I would say they're both basically in the same tier. And Devon Vele is absolutely playable. I think Devon Vele, if you look at what he's been doing target-wise, it's been there. So I think it's 100% playable for Devon Vele. Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, got an eye on these guys. Marvin Mims, Sean Payton is committed to continue to get him plays on a weekly basis, but right now, he's not quite in that Rashad Bateman category, the Quentin Johnson category. If he has a good one this week, then he'll be talking. So let me know how your lineup looks this weekend. If you want to see where these wide receivers ended up in my top 30 rankings, click on this video right here.